Now, this Fox News alert for the third time in as many months, the UK is waking up in the shadow of terror. Many streets in central London right now still cordoned off this morning, where at least 7 people have been killed, dozens others hurt in last night's rampage. It started with a van running down pedestrians on London Bridge, followed by a knife attack, several knife attacks in a nearby restaurant district. The 3 attackers shot and killed by police 8 minutes later. And new this morning, we're learning that 12 people have now been arrested in eastern London in connection with this attack. British Prime Minister Theresa May speaking earlier this morning.
We believe we are experiencing a new trend in the threat we face, as terrorism breeds terrorism, and perpetrators are inspired to attack, not only on the basis of carefully constructed plots after years of planning and training, and not even as lone attackers radicalised online, but by copying one another and often using the crudest of means of attack.
We will get reaction from Nigel Farage in just a moment in London, but first let's go to London Live, where David Lee Miller is standing by with the very latest this morning. David Lee, good morning to you. What can you tell us?
Good morning, Maria. 8 minutes. 8 minutes is how long this entire attack took to unfold. In that 8 minutes, 7 people were killed, at least 48 people were wounded, and the 3 attackers themselves were killed by police. It all happened not far from where I am now standing, and as you can see over my shoulder, the street here is still closed off. The scene last night here was indeed very different. As you mentioned, a white van was moving at a fast rate of speed south across London Bridge. It plowed into pedestrians, then it moved on to a nearby area where the attackers then exited the vehicle and went on a stabbing spree. What authorities say now is that the attackers have not yet been publicly identified, but the survivors say they will never forget what they saw.
And then a guy come round the corner, I went, run, 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 they got blazed knives, they're going to stab you, the terrorist, run. And then he turned around and then they just stabbed him multiple times as well. We went on the floor.
It was quite scary because, you know, you don't know what happens. You can see a white van, people raiding it, you think, is something going to explode? Are we far enough away? And the police had such a, urgency in their voice that they were saying, get out.
This morning, the investigation has led police to East London, the neighborhood of Barking. Following a series of raids, there are now 12 people that have been taken into custody. This is an ongoing operation, we are told, and more people might be arrested. London's Mayor, Sadiq Khan, spoke just a short time ago for a grieving city.
There aren't words to describe the grief and anger that our city will be feeling today. I'm appalled and furious that these cowardly terrorists will deliberately target innocent Londoners and bystanders enjoying their Saturday night. There can be no justification for the acts of these terrorists, and I'm quite clear that we will never let them win, nor will we allow them to cower our city or Londoners.
On Thursday, this country is expected to go to the polls to vote for a prime minister. All the major parties have suspended campaigning today, the campaigning likely to resume tomorrow. And as for the level of the terror threat, that has not been upgraded. It was upgraded, Maria, you might recall, after the Manchester attack to critical. It was then lowered to severe. And at this hour, the terror level threat here in London remains severe, but this is a community that is very much on guard.
Right, and we know that right after that Manchester attack, the level went to critical, and Theresa May said, we are worried that there could be another attack imminently. And here we are a week later talking about the third attack in as many months. David Lee Miller, thank you very much. I want to bring in Nigel Farage right now. He is a member of the European Parliament, a former leader of the UK Independence Party. It is good to see you, Nigel Farage, obviously on horrible circumstances here. What can you tell us about what's happening on the ground in London right now in terms of the sentiment of the people? How do you see it?
Well, it's jumpy in one way because I've been in London all morning and there are a lot of police cars around, a lot of police on the streets, quite a lot of sirens, and I guess we now know there have been a lot of raids in East London and at least a dozen people have been detained. So London is very quiet this morning. There are fewer people out on the streets than I would normally expect to see on a Sunday. I mean, generally, people do in this city, and don't forget we had the threat of IRA terrorism, long before this, people generally do respond incredibly well, despite the horrors that have taken place. But I do detect there is one slight change of attitude. And that is that every time one of these things happen, our leaders show their regret, their sorrow, their astonishment, and their shock. And I think we're a little bit less shocked than we used to be. We're kind of getting used to this, which is very, very bad news indeed. And I think people are beginning to say, what are our leaders actually going to do? Just expressing sorrow, just talking and using words like solidarity simply isn't enough. And Maria, I'll make this prediction.
Right.
Theresa May has spoken. Theresa May has spoken outside the steps of Number 10 today, and she's actually used the phrase Islamic terrorism. Now, I think that in itself may well be a first, because many of our politicians have been in denial, as indeed Hillary was, on this point.
Yeah.
But unless people see some really concrete action is going to be taken, then I think the calls for interning thousands of suspects will grow louder and louder.
Well, let's talk about that. What kind of concrete action do you want to see, Nigel? Because you think about the fact that we had the Westminster Bridge attack in March, followed up by the Ariana Grande attack last week, the concert. Now this, 3 attacks in 3 months. What concrete action do you want to see that we're not seeing coming out of the UK?
I want to hear that in our state-run schools and prisons, which we're in charge of, we are absolutely going to make sure that radicalisation doesn't take place. I want to hear that in the mosques in this country, we will actually be unafraid to kick out of this country people who go in there and preach hate, because frankly we've been too politically correct to do any of that. And I also want to hear, which I heard a bit of from the Prime Minister, that we do want to try, if we possibly can, to stop some of this stuff being there, freely available on the internet. I mean, that is an absolute minimum. But what really angers people is, for example, 2 or 3 years ago, I was part of a campaign that said, if anybody left this country and fought in Syria for ISIS, they should be stopped from getting back into Britain. And do you know something? 400 people have returned to Britain, having been radicalised further and brutalised in Syria. 400 have been let back in, and only 1 has been stopped. And that's why, Maria, I say, we don't want words. We don't just need the Prime Minister outside Number 10 Downing Street saying enough is enough. We want her to actually do something.
And let's not forget, this comes just the weekend before the general election in the UK, and that gap between Theresa May and her competitor has been narrowing. Do you think this impacts the election on Thursday?
No, because her competitor, which is Mr Corbyn, who leads the Socialist Party, Labour Party, but he himself is a very, very, quite hard left socialist. Corbyn himself is seen to be weak on terrorism and weak on terror. So just because Theresa May was the Home Secretary in charge of our Homeland Security for 6 years, some may say she failed and didn't do enough, but it's very difficult to see the Labour Party, the Socialists, gaining any benefit from it.
Many of these people and these incidents have proven that sometimes the attackers have been on watch lists. There are tens of thousands of people on watch lists in the UK, even more so in the US. What do we need to do to get ahead of this, knowing that we're already watching these perpetrators that are going on to commit real damage?
Well, we don't yet know who these 3 individuals are, and my guess is the authorities will not tell us who they are until they've completed the sweep of all those closely connected to them. But I would be very surprised if these were not known persons, very surprised if they hadn't been investigated at some point. And I have to tell you, even though I've been one of those voices saying there is a real problem here,
right,
even I was shocked last week when I learned there are 23,000 people of interest to the authorities in this country in relation to jihadi terrorism. So the problem that we built for ourselves is huge. We've done absolutely nothing to deal with the segregation that exists within our cities.
Right.
We haven't clamped down on radicalisation in state institutions. We've been very weak, frankly, with our borders. So we do face a massive problem, and I can't see, short of hugely increased resources for our security services, I can't see anything else we can do. Now, we could take the 3,500 who are the genuinely suspected terrorists themselves, as opposed to being linked and associated. We could round them all up and intern them in prison. That is an option.
Well, what you're saying is also one of the reasons that U.S. President Donald Trump has tweeted out saying, look, we need this travel ban in place, trying to push his policies on the heels of this horrifying situation in the U.K. I don't know if you think that's going to help sway minds in the U.S. Real quick, Nigel.
If I was an American and I was looking at London, Paris, Brussels, Berlin, and the increasing rate of terrorist atrocities, I would say, whether I like Donald J. Trump or not, he is absolutely right to be committed to attempting to make America safer. And it's absolutely wrong that judges and some on Capitol Hill are trying to stop him. He is trying to stop your country going down this route.
Yeah.
He's right.
Nigel, thank you very much for weighing in this morning. Nigel Farage joining us in London. President Trump pointing to the need for that travel ban in the aftermath of the London attacks. Should the U.S. re-examine its counterterrorism strategies? We'll talk with former Attorney General Michael Mukasey next, right here in studio. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now more on the aftermath of the London attacks. Investigators now are trying to figure out whether the men behind last night's deadly terrorist attack had any help. Joining me right now is Daniel Linsky. Linsky is the former superintendent-in-chief for the Boston Police Department. He led that department's response in the wake of the marathon bombings. He joins us right now. Sir, thank you very much for weighing in this morning. Tell me what took place after the attacks in Boston and how investigators right now are leading to or trying to find out the specifics behind the perpetrators here.
Thanks, Maria. Well, what happened was we first got our victims out of the scene as quickly as possible. Same thing that the London authorities did last night. You secure that scene, you go through it and process it, looking for DNA, forensics, bomb making, any possible link to the individuals involved, and anyone who may have helped them or provided logistical support. You get your coordinated responses together, and you start running down tips and leads at the same time. While you're doing that, you've got to deploy a large number of highly visible officers throughout the entire city so that you can get on with the day-to-day operations of the city at the same time focusing on an investigation that requires intense resources.
Now, we know that 12 people are being investigated right now in connection with the three attackers who police shot and killed. Does it look to you, does it feel to you that this is a much broader network? We're still waiting on someone to take actual responsibility for this morning.
Maria, we don't know whether these 12 are associated with the individuals from last night. I remember when I was the chief in Boston, at one time we had 3 separate terrorist plots that were going on. So there might have been ongoing investigations that they decided to move on now, that they have enough information to go forward. So there are definitely people that are engaged in terrorist activities, maybe associated with last night or maybe individual plots. The authorities are rounding up those individuals that they think can cause harm, and they'll run down whoever is associated, whether it's computer links, forensics, data and signals monitoring as far as who they were talking to in the UK or outside the UK, and figure out what brought them together, how they were radicalized, and where they were supported.
Now, these individuals who were shot and killed last night by police, they were being watched initially. anyway? I mean, we have tens of thousands of people right now on a watch list in the UK. They're almost 30,000 people. Tell us how the best route to get ahead of this. If you're already on the watch list, how is it possible that you're able to carry out this kind of attack?
It's possible because law enforcement is overwhelmed. The number of people who are potentially talking about and thinking about and indicating that they may want to cause harm clearly outwhelms law enforcement's resources. That's true in the UK. It's true in Boston. To truly surveil somebody for 24 hours a day, it takes 40, 50, 60 individuals with electronic surveillance and other activities. It's a daunting task, and we have to engage the public at the front end to start reporting these individuals when they see radical activity, when they're talking about doing these things. We had it with a Boston police captain whose son unfortunately had mental health issues and started talking about doing jihadist activities. The captain was brave enough to go to the FBI authorities and say, I think you should be looking at my son. And as a result, a school bombing and shooting attack was thwarted because of the courage of that father. We need other fathers, other mothers, aunts, uncles, religious community members to step up when individuals are indicating that they no longer want to be in polite society and that they intend to harm people.
There has been a movement to be more politically correct over the last 10 years. We were just talking about this a moment ago. I was with Michael Mukasey, former Attorney General here. And, you know, there are groups of people, whether it be in the UK, in France, that are just not assimilating with the West, and they are following their Sharia law, and the leaders are allowing it. What do you want to see done? I mean, when you look at the fact that even under the Obama administration, we weren't even allowed to look at people's social media account. It was just wrong. It was targeting people. If we looked at what they were saying on social media, of course, had we done that, we would have seen that they were putting out hate.
Yeah, we need to make sure that we're protecting our country like we would a business that we protect. We need concentric circles of security. The first line of security, obviously, is our military forces. They need to go where, if there are people who are telling us that they intend to harm us, our military forces need to go outside in that outer ring and deal with that threat. Then we need inner circles of security as we come into the United States, and we need policies and procedures that are consistent with keeping people safe. But at the same time, we do want to make sure we're balancing the freedom and ability to have our lives the way they are here. The one thing we don't want to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater, where we go to one side completely extreme and we start taking away the rights that we fight so valuably for here. So there's a way to do it. You can do it intelligently, and you can do it methodically, and we need to engage that through a whole community-wide process.
All right, we will leave it there. Daniel Linsky, thanks very much for weighing in this morning. We will keep following that and see you soon. Thank you, sir. British Prime Minister Theresa May, meanwhile, describing what she says is her country's tolerance to extremism. Is terrorism thriving because of political correctness? Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee will join me live next. We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. This Fox News alert with new developments in the London terrorist attacks. Here what we know right now. This morning, 12 people were arrested in connection to the rampage. The attack beginning last night when a van plowed through people on the London Bridge. The killers then drove to a busy entertainment district where they jumped out of the van and started stabbing people. In all, at least 7 people were killed. 48 others were seriously hurt. Here's British Prime Minister Theresa May at a meeting of her emergency committee.
While we have made significant progress in recent years, there is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. So we need to become far more robust in identifying it and stamping it out across the public sector and across society. That will require some difficult and often embarrassing conversations. But the whole of our country needs to come together to take on this extremism.
I'm joined right now by Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas and a Fox News contributor. Governor, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Pretty extraordinary scenarios here. You know, Donald Trump obviously tried to institute his travel ban when he first got in the White House, and he keeps getting pushback, and we're just seeing more terrorism across the world.
Well, Donald Trump has proven, Maria, that he was right, and all of these people in the various liberal courts are wrong. When Theresa May made the comment today about we need to have some embarrassing conversations, what's embarrassing is that they've had open borders for so long, and now they act like they're shocked that people have come in through the open doors and windows and are killing them. You know, if you keep getting hurt by mosquito bites, at some point you decide to start killing mosquitoes. And what has to happen across this world is we recognize that when we are being destroyed and devoured by the mosquitoes, by this evil, at some point you've got to just attack it head on and quit dancing around the fact that it is Islamic terror carried out by religious fanatics.
Well, what do you want to see happen here? Obviously, Theresa May has an election next week. I don't know if you think this is going to impact that. I guess we just discussed it with Nigel Farage that Corbyn is also very conservative when it comes to terrorism. But what's your take in terms of what takes place now in the UK?
I think it's going to be a real confusing time for the Brits because they're going to be looking. Jeremy Corbyn is certainly not one who has been overtly ready to start closing the borders and being more strict about who comes in, and Theresa May hasn't. So, you know, the sad thing is they don't have a really clear choice in this. We did have a choice last November in America, and we made the choice, and that's why Donald Trump, one of the reasons for sure that Donald Trump was elected. Maria, at some point, you know, we can pretend that this is not real. And I watched the mayor this morning, and he came out in his statement and said, we're one of the safest places in the world. Go tell that to the parents of teenage girls who are having to identify their daughter in the morgue with a toe tag. I'm sorry, but, you know, that isn't working for the people who are now afraid for their kids to go to a ball game or a concert or just to be walking about the streets with their friends for fear of something that is a random yet targeted attack on the totally innocent victims that we're seeing in these terrorist attacks.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I did see Sadiq Khan's comments, the mayor of London there, and they, you know, they really coincide with the comment from Prime Minister Theresa May, who says the attack on the London Bridge shows that there is far too much tolerance of Islamist extremism in Britain today. Do you think that suggests things will change in the coming weeks?
I don't know if the politicians are capable of making change. They live behind locked doors, surrounded by armed guards. They're carefully protected. But the average citizen is not, and they seem to be living in these bubbles. And they'll make statements after a terrorist attack, but then there's still this irrational approach to trying to believe that it's okay to leave your doors unlocked and not expect people to come in and raid your house. Look, most everybody, Maria, that you and I know have doors locked at night. They have alarm and security systems. And why do they do that? It's not because they're paranoid. It's because they're just taking care of their family's safety. But when you don't protect your own country's borders, then you're not acting even rationally as a leader of your country in the same way that you would act in your own home. Right. That doesn't make sense.
And that is what is going on here in the U.S. as well. I mean, all of this politicization of all of our agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA. You know, we were talking earlier with Michael Mukasey that the Obama administration spied on so many people. They spied on Lindsey Graham. They spied on Rand Paul. We know this now. The intelligence community told Lindsey Graham. He's out there saying he was also unmasked. Why were they wanting him to be unmasked? All of this, as Donald Trump is trying to push through, you know, his policies like the travel ban and getting constant resistance from the left, Governor.
Yeah, I'm not really afraid of Lindsey Graham or Rand Paul, but I am afraid of people who come to this country with the intent to do harm. America's a melting pot. That's what we've always been. But we've got people who come, and they're not willing to melt. They don't want to become part of us. They want us to change into them. And we can't do that. We're not going to do that. And we need to have a screening process. And that's what President Trump has said from the beginning.
Right.
It's not a complete ban. It's a screening process to find out, Do you want to come and be a part of a melting pot? Do you want to be an American? If you do, we got room for you. But if you want to come and radicalize America, if you want to come and, Islamify America, no, we just don't have room for that right now.
And that's what's going on in a number of places, in corners of the UK, corners of France, where there are groups that are not assimilating and going by their own laws, Sharia law, which, of course, we know what that means. Governor, thank you for weighing in this morning. An important day to hear from you. We appreciate it very much. Governor Mike Huckabee joining us there. U.S. lawmakers are now weighing in on last night's deadly attack in London. What impact will it have on the security here in the U.S.? Congressman Ron DeSantis is with me. He's from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He will join me live as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. Stay with us. Reacting to this morning to last night's London terrorist attack, House Homeland Security Committee member Pete King offering this statement. I commend British Prime Minister Theresa May for her strong statement, calling out Islamist extremism and promising tough action, both militarily and domestically. No apologies, no political correctness. I'm joined right now by Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks very much for weighing in.
Good morning.
We've heard from Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. We've heard from Theresa May. Give us your assessment of what you're hearing from the leadership in reaction to this.
Well, I'll tell you, Maria, this is something that is unfortunately somewhat predictable in the sense that you have some of these simmering insular communities in places like Great Britain and France, Belgium, that we've seen over the last months and even years. And these attacks are becoming more and more regular. I think that there's a different approach that probably needs to be taken. Maybe Prime Minister May has finally recognized that, although I will say she said they've shown far too much tolerance for extremism. My question would be, why would you show any tolerance for Islamic extremism? Tolerance of evil is a crime, and so I think they need to view this much more toughly than they have been so far. For our part in the Congress, we do have a president that's taken a different approach, both in terms of being forward-pressing against ISIS abroad, but also concerned about our borders here at home. And I would say one thing we can do in the Congress is to understand that terrorism is a big problem, but it's part of a larger problem of this ideology of militant Islam, and that's nurtured by groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. And we've been working in Congress to try to designate them as a terrorist organization, because I think that would really go to solving the root of this problem, which is at its heart an ideological problem.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up, because the Muslim Brotherhood is a group that, to me, seems to have infiltrated the U.S. government. I mean, for some reason, the Muslim Brotherhood keeps coming up because they are very involved in certain decision-making. I mean, do you believe the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization?
Oh, without question. If you look at what they do, they're dedicated to promoting Islamic supremacism. They support societies based on Sharia law. You look at some of the radical clerics in places like Egypt and throughout the Middle East. They have deep roots with the Muslim Brotherhood. And so the Brotherhood really provides, I think, the ideological framework. It obviously does provide financial support and support of terrorism as well. But I would say that is kind of the foundation from which groups like ISIS are able to really wreak havoc.
Well, if you're so sure of this, why didn't President Obama ever call them a terrorist organization? Should President Trump be coming out and calling out the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization? And what are the implications of that, Congressman?
Well, we went round and round with the Obama administration. If you remember, when the Muslim Brotherhood government took over Egypt, the Obama administration backed the Brotherhood. And when President Morsi, the Morsi government was deposed and President al-Sisi took over, Sisi is very much opposed to radical Islam. Many of us in Congress thought that Obama's administration should work with Sisi, but yet they really preferred to work with the Brotherhood. And so that, I think, is something I've never really understood. We in Congress can do legislation to designate the Brotherhood. I do think that there is the ability of the executive to take some unilateral action. So I would definitely tell the president that that would be a good thing to do. I think it would be very clarifying.
All right, so you want him to deem them as a terrorist organization, bottom line. Let me ask you this, being on the Foreign Affairs Committee, what kind of interaction or participation will the U.S. have with the U.K. in terms of combating terrorism?
Well, I think they're a strong ally. We have to provide them with support. We do do intelligence, logistics, military support. But one thing we do have to look at is there's a lot of focus, say, on the travel ban from the 6 countries, places like Somalia, which are obviously a high risk of terrorism. I think the issue, though, with this, as we're seeing, is there's a lot of homegrown terrorism in countries that are strong allies of ours. Great Britain, Belgium, France, some of these European countries. And so a lot of times those people can come into our country without even getting a visa because they have a visa waiver. So that's just something that we have to come to terms with and realize that this is a threat that's emanating from many places throughout the world.
Yeah. Congressman, thank you. Thank you for weighing in this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll keep watching it. Congressman Ron DeSantis. Up next, our panel on deck. Ed Rollins, Jessica Tarlov reacting to the situation in London and the response from the UK and President Trump. Stay with us. We're looking ahead right now, right here. Back in a minute. Welcome back. We are covering the latest out of London. We want to bring in our panel right now. Ed Rollins is a former campaign manager for Ronald Reagan in 1984. Jessica Tarlov is a Democratic strategist and a Fox News contributor. And we are happy to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Your reaction today on the terrorists?
Shock, disappointment. I mean, again, this is just an ongoing occurrence here. And I think the American public has to understand that Donald Trump was right about these things. And we have to basically be very restrictive. And we have to basically make sure that we have great diligence and support our law enforcement people and our intelligence people, because it's going to come here.
It's pretty extraordinary, Jessica. When you look at what Donald Trump has been talking about, it seems like everything he says is actually happening, from the terrorism part of it to the intelligence part of it, with all these guys getting spied on.
Well, I think that it's complicated. I mean, we know that his travel ban, and he called it again a ban in his tweet this morning, which the ACLU picked up on. So it's officially a ban. Wouldn't have covered anyone certainly coming from the UK. And I understand the need to be vigilant, of course, especially because it looks like we could have more and more domestic homegrown terrorism, which is what happened in Manchester, and we know there are 12 arrests. We're not sure who all those people are right now. I am concerned, though, by the rhetoric already of what's coming out about this. We don't have all the answers. I think Theresa May struck exactly the right tone, as did the mayor of London, who Donald Trump then went and attacked on Twitter. But needlessly,
but what did the mayor of London's assistant say about Donald Trump's tweet?
His spokesman came out and said that the mayor of London doesn't have time to respond to Donald Trump's ill-informed tweet, because what the president did is took one bit of what Sadiq Khan said and ignored the rest of it, which was, we're working on this with best emergency people, and then he said at the end, no reason to be alarmed, to keep his people calm, and that's all that Donald Trump seized on, to scare people, to scare us here at home, and I think that that's unfortunate.
How could you not be alarmed? You've just had these numerous occasions here in London in which every week we come here expecting to talk about something in the political system, and all of a sudden we have these terrorist acts that are taking place. I mean, as a parent, I'd be scared to death to send my children out to a nightclub. And sooner or later, terrorism is exactly that. It creates terror. It makes people fearful. It's not about the numbers. It is certainly the numbers of those who were killed and wounded last night, but it creates a mindset, and the mindset is that these people can basically disrupt the political process here in this country and elsewhere.
Right. I think when you look at what he said, I mean, I was also struck by it, hearing Sadiq Khan say London is the safest city in the world, or one of the safest cities in the world. Look, we just had 3 attacks in 3 months.
Absolutely.
How do you make that statement?
Listen, I'm not sure what I would do if I was in that position. Being the mayor or in government office at these times is obviously difficult. You want to make sure that people feel as comfortable as possible, but also to tell them, hey, you can't just maybe walk around as you used to, and there is a dangerous threat out there, and they just dealt with this in Manchester as well. But I don't think that the right tactic is for the President of the United States, first of all, to attack another foreign leader, which is what Sadiq Khan is. I mean, imagine if the day after 9/11, someone from another country went after the way that Giuliani was managing Bloomberg, eventually Bloomberg was managing the situation here. I don't think it's appropriate. I think that it sends the wrong message. And I don't know why on a day like today, we need to be making more enemies than friends. I think the right tone was obviously Donald Trump's second tweet, which is, we stand with you, we're here to support you in any way. But his first inclination was to prop up his travel ban. And the travel ban would
has made no difference.
At the end of the day here, I mean, we're going to go through this process ourselves. Ever since 9/11, we have basically had greater security in this country, and we have made this city a very safe city, New York. But the country has to be prepared for these kinds of activities coming here. That's what terrorist is about. London is an open city today. Great Britain is an open city. They're a great democracy like we are. They believe in the same kinds of rights that we do. And we basically have to have due diligence. We have to be supportive of the president whenever he
That's a thoughtful way to say it. I wish that more people would speak like that instead of to speaking kind of, aggressive one-word sentences about these things.
Quick break. What do we need to watch for in the week ahead? That's next from our panel. Stay with us. Sunday Morning Futures continues.